Today I will be providing an update on our efforts related to the Atlantic Large Whale Take Reduction Plan. So I'll just be talking about one piece of a larger effort to recover the North Atlantic right whale, in particular fishing gear entanglements. So the work we do with the Atlantic Large Whale Take Reduction team is aimed at addressing risk of entanglement in fishing gear. We work with a variety of stakeholders on the take reduction team to get recommendations on how to reduce fishery risk to large whales, most notably the North Atlantic right whale. NOAA Fisheries is required to reduce mortality and serious injury of the right whale to a level below the potential biological removal level, or PBR, to facilitate population recovery. Unfortunately, mortality and serious injury remains well above PBR, which is currently less than 1 whale a year, and has increased in recent years as the population has declined. Estimated mortality is up to 2 to 3 times more than what is observed, which has recently been well above the number of calves produced in any given year. In order for the population to recover, we need to dramatically reduce mortality and serious injuries due to human causes. The primary contributors to mortality and serious injury in right whales are entanglements and vessel strikes. A look at long-term data sets of observed mortality and serious injury suggests that entanglements occur roughly 2 times more than vessel strikes, and overall, the number of all of these incidents has increased 1.5 times in the past decade compared to 2001 to 2010. We've also seen a noticeable increase in Canadian incidents in the more recent decades, likely related to an ecosystem shift that pushed some whales up into the Gulf of St. Lawrence, but also could be partially related to increased survey efforts associated with those distribution changes. But we also see that we had an increase in incidents with unknown origin, so there's still a lot we don't know, which makes it hard to narrow down exactly where incidents are occurring. We do know they are still occurring in the US at some level. In order to address entanglement risk in US waters, we first implemented a rule in 2021 aimed at reducing risk from the Northeast lobster and Jonah crab trap pot fisheries, given they represent over 90% of the US fisheries risk coast-wide. This included 2 restricted areas, one new one in southern New England and one new one in Gulf of Maine. It also expanded the current Massachusetts restricted area. Gear modifications were implemented on May 1st of this year, including minimum trawl lengths and weak line. Unfortunately, there is still no reliable source of weak line in LMA3, but we've been working hard to find options in this area. While NIMS has already begun discussions of additional risk reduction to fisheries not regulated in the 2021 rule, population information updated in the fall of last year suggested that the previous minimum risk reduction target of 60% was insufficient to reduce mortality and serious injury to a level below PBR. We presented this to the TRT in November of 2021, and it was based on recommendations we received from the Atlantic Scientific Review Group, or ASRG. Their recommendations included the use of total mortality estimates from the most recent 5 years generated by Dr. Pace's population model, and to use the most recent observed mortality and serious injury incidents with known causes to determine the proportion of total estimated mortalities that were likely due to entanglement as opposed to vessel strikes. At this time, we used the total mortality estimates from 2015 through 2019 and determined the proportion of those likely due to entanglement based on 2016 to 2020 incident data. The ASRG noted that they did not have a recommendation for how to apportion incidents by country of origin due to lack of empirical data, so we looked at a wide range of possible alternatives from 50-50 to 30-70 US to Canada to see how robust the risk reduction calculations were to these assumptions. Given the high level of mortality occurring in the population, the country apportionment did little to shift the total risk reduction needed and suggested an 89 to 94% risk reduction is necessary to meet PBR depending on country apportionment. So a 20% difference in country apportionment only resulted in a 5% difference in risk reduction. Based on this information, we estimated we need at least a 90% risk reduction target to get below PBR, which is 30% more than we previously estimated our risk reduction target to be. And as some of you may also know, Judge Boasberg ruled that the 2021 final rule failed to satisfy requirements of the Marine Mammal Protection Act. The court held that the MMPA mandated that NIMS include measures expected to reduce mortality and serious injury below PBR within 6 months of implementation, The agency's current goal is to finalize a new rule on an expedited timeline within approximately 2 years, but we won't have a definitive timeline until the court rules on a remedy. To help us determine what combinations of measures are needed to get mortality and serious injury below PBR, we have been working with the Northeast Fisheries Science Center to update and apply their decision support tool to guide our discussion about where risk is occurring to reduce the chances of an entanglement. There are 3 different layers, one showing density of gear along the coast. Right whale density is predicted using sightings data and associated environmental variables, and gear threat adds an additional estimate of risk based on strength or lethality of the gear. This tool has been used to help us determine how much risk reduction has already been achieved through new measures implemented over the last year and how much risk is remaining coast-wide. Of all coast-wide Atlantic large whale take reduction plan fishery risk, Northeast Jonah crab and lobster was about 93.5% of all risk before our 2021 rule. 3.7% was from gillnet fisheries and 2.8% from other trap pot fisheries. We estimated that 2021 rule achieved about a 46% risk reduction, and we know we need at least 90% of all risk reduced. So we are looking to get at least an additional 44% risk reduction to meet our legal mandate. Most of the risk remaining after our first phase of rulemaking is still in the Northeast Jonah crab and lobster fisheries. The majority of this being from the federal fishery, followed by state fisheries. Federal gillnet fisheries represent the next largest risk after Northeast lobster and Jonah crab, followed by other state and federal trap pots and state gillnet. When we look at this risk by region, the most risk is still present in the Gulf of Maine, followed by southern New England and the mid-Atlantic, with very little risk remaining in the southeast. Here are some examples of the types of measures that have been discussed by the take reduction team. For broad weak line, there have been suggestions to implement weak line requirements based on distance from shore from all fisheries, and to expand the use of weak links in the head rope of gillnet fisheries. The team has specifically discussed ways to approach a 50% line reduction through the use of one buoy line, with the other line using ropeless gear, trawling up measures for trap pot fisheries, trap caps, and line caps, as well as things like paneling up for gillnet. We also have talked about various new suggestions for seasonal restricted areas, such as applying all trap pot restricted areas to gillnet, expanding the South Island restricted area in space and time in southern New England, and rolling closures in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. And though not risk reduction, we have also heard about ideas to increase the number and type of gear marks to improve our ability to determine where entanglements are occurring. And this is a huge team effort, so I want to acknowledge everyone on the Atlantic Large Whale Take Reduction team, as well as staff at GARFO, at the Northeast Fisheries Science Center, at headquarters in the Southeast Regional Office, as well as the Office of General Counsel. Thank you.